humanity and reminds us that kindness can change lives. If you're visiting for the first time, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because the stories we share here are meant to touch your heart and inspire your soul. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever seen a moment so unexpected that it completely shattered your idea of who someone really is? Today's story begins in the gleaming glass tower of one of the most powerful corporations in the city. Inside a high-stakes boardroom, executives sit around a long, polished table, debating deals worth millions. They wear tailored suits, speak in confident tones, and barely notice the people who keep their world spotless and functional: the janitors, the security guards, the receptionists. To them, those workers are invisible. But then something extraordinary happens. In the middle of a heated meeting, the heavy doors of the boardroom slowly open, and a small girl, no more than 6 years old, steps inside clutching an old, worn-out notebook. Her big brown eyes scan the room nervously as she softly says, "Excuse me, my dad dropped this." The executives glance around in confusion, some frowning, others whispering. But when one of them realizes who her father is, the janitor they had all walked past 100 times without even saying hello, an uncomfortable silence falls over the room. Then, when the CEO takes the notebook and opens it, her confident expression fades. What she sees inside stops her cold, as if time itself freezes for a moment. What could possibly be inside a janitor's notebook that would make a powerful CEO question everything she thought she knew about success, intelligence, and human worth? This story matters because it challenges the way we look at people. It reminds us that true value isn't defined by what someone wears or the title they hold. It's defined by heart, effort, and integrity. So stay with me until the very end, because this story will not only move you, it might just change how you see the people around you forever. The story begins high above the city streets, in a glittering skyscraper that symbolizes wealth, ambition, and authority. Inside, the air hums with tension and quiet competition. Employees in crisp suits move quickly through the halls, clutching tablets and coffee cups, their faces set with determination. The company, Hale Dynamics, is one of the leading firms in the tech and infrastructure industry, and today is no ordinary day. It's the day of the most important board meeting of the year. Every executive in the building knows that one wrong move could cost millions, or worse, their position. At the head of this empire sits Rebecca Hale, the CEO, a woman in her early 40s with sharp intelligence, immaculate style, and an even sharper tongue. She's known for her ability to make decisions that others wouldn't dare to. To her, success is everything, and emotions have no place in business. As she prepares for the meeting, her assistant hurries beside her, briefing her on figures, proposals, and the visiting investors who expect to be impressed. Rebecca barely nods, her mind already focused on the numbers projected on the screen waiting in the boardroom. Meanwhile, outside that shining bubble of authority, another world exists within the same walls. In the quiet corners of the building, the janitorial staff moves silently, polishing floors, emptying trash bins, and wiping down glass doors that reflect the success of others. Among them is David Carter, a man in his late 30s with tired eyes and calloused hands, wearing a faded uniform that bears the company logo. His job is simple but essential: keep everything spotless so the executives can focus on their ambitions. He works quietly, unnoticed by nearly everyone. To most of the people here, he's invisible. As the morning rush builds, the contrast between the two worlds couldn't be sharper: the polished boardroom of power and the quiet corridors of service. Yet both depend on each other in ways neither side fully realizes. Rebecca, preparing to deliver a presentation that could secure a billion-dollar contract, walks past David without a glance. He steps aside politely, giving her space, not expecting acknowledgement. But in his pocket rests a small leather notebook, a secret world of ideas, sketches, and hopes that no one in this towering empire would ever imagine belonged to a janitor. This is the environment where our story takes root, a place driven by ambition and hierarchy, where people are measured by their titles and salaries. And yet, in this very building where power rules, an act of innocence and love from a little girl will soon remind everyone that humanity is far greater than status. The stage is set, the characters are in place, and the moment that changes everything is about to begin. While the executives upstairs discuss profits and projections, David Carter quietly begins his morning shift on the lower floors. To most people, he's just the janitor, but to his 6-year-old daughter, Leela, he's a hero. Every morning before dawn, David ties his worn work boots, grabs his cleaning cart, and leaves their small apartment, kissing Leela on the forehead as she sleeps. Life hasn't been easy for him. His wife passed away years ago after a long illness, leaving him to raise Leela on his own. Since then, every decision he's made has revolved around her future. He doesn't complain, he just works harder. Once David wasn't a janitor. He used to be a mechanic who ran a modest repair shop on the edge of town. He was good at it too, known for fixing what others threw away. But when the economy turned and the shop closed, he took whatever job he could find. He didn't see cleaning floors as shameful work. He saw it as a way to keep food on the table and his daughter in school. "There's dignity in every job," he often told Leela. "What matters isn't what you do, but how you do it." Those words became the foundation of her young heart. At work, David rarely speaks unless spoken to. He moves through the building like a shadow, mopping, scrubbing, polishing, with a quiet rhythm of pride. The executives barely notice him, though he notices everything. The cracks in the walls, the flickering lights, the way people rush without looking up. During his breaks, instead of resting, he takes out his old leather notebook, the one he carries everywhere. Inside it are drawings and handwritten notes, sketches of better building layouts, more efficient systems, and small innovations that could save the company money and energy. He doesn't draw for recognition, he does it because he loves understanding how things work and how they can be improved. At night, after long shifts, he sits by Leela's bedside reading stories and listening to her dreams. She tells him she wants to be an engineer like Mommy used to be. Hearing that both fills him with pride and pain. He encourages her, saying, "Then you'll build things even better than she did." They laugh together, dreaming beyond their struggles. But every now and then, when Leela falls asleep, David looks at his reflection in the dark window and wonders if he's doing enough, if the world will ever see him as more than the man who cleans their floors. Still, he keeps going, for Leela, for love, and for hope, because deep down he believes that hard work never goes unnoticed forever, that someday, somehow, the world will recognize the value of quiet people like him. What he doesn't know is that this belief is about to be tested in the most unexpected and life-changing way, thanks to one small mistake, a forgotten notebook, and a brave little girl who refuses to let her father's work go unseen. The morning of the big meeting dawned bright and clear, the city skyline glowing gold in the early light. Inside Hale Dynamics, everything was tense and humming with energy. Executives hurried in and out of offices with documents and coffee, their voices low and urgent. Today, Rebecca Hale, the CEO, would present a massive merger proposal to international investors, one that could define her career. The conference room was being prepared meticulously, fresh flowers on the table, polished glass, and spotless floors reflecting the ceiling lights. For most of the staff, it was just another high-pressure day. But for David Carter, the janitor, it was a morning that would unknowingly change his life. David had come in early, as he always did, to make sure the top floor was perfect before the executives arrived. He took quiet pride in his work, humming softly as he wiped down the long table and arranged chairs with precision. Each detail mattered to him, even if no one noticed. On the lower floors, his little daughter Leela sat swinging her legs on a bench outside the small security office. It wasn't usual for her to come to his work, but that morning, their elderly neighbor who usually watched her had fallen ill. David had promised she could stay for just an hour until school started. She carried her favorite stuffed bunny and a little paper envelope. Inside it was a crayon drawing she'd made for her dad, showing him in his janitor's uniform, standing proudly beside a tall building labeled Daddy's Work. As David worked upstairs, his mind raced with worries. He didn't want Leela to get in trouble for being there. He planned to finish the top floor quickly and walk her to school himself. But in his rush, something important slipped his mind. When he leaned over to empty a trash bin beside the boardroom door, his old leather notebook, the one filled with sketches, quotes, and personal notes, slipped from his pocket and landed silently near a chair leg. Oblivious, he moved on, mopping the floor and humming to himself, unaware that his most personal possession now lay in the heart of the company's most powerful room. At that very moment, Rebecca Hale was rehearsing her presentation in her office down the hall. She was under enormous stress. Investors were flying in from Dubai, and her company's reputation was on the line. She couldn't afford any mistakes or distractions. Her assistant reminded her to keep it sharp, keep it clean. She nodded curtly, her expression unreadable. She believed that emotion had no place in leadership. Efficiency, focus, results, those were her pillars. Meanwhile, downstairs, Leela's curiosity got the better of her. She'd been told to wait quietly, but she wanted to give her dad the drawing before school. Clutching the little paper envelope, she began to wander through the gleaming hallways, tiny shoes tapping softly on marble floors. Every adult she passed towered over her, but she walked confidently. Her daddy worked here, after all. In a few minutes, Leela would walk through the door of that same boardroom, where the fate of the company, her father's notebook, and Rebecca's own beliefs would collide. No one in that room knew that the morning's most important visitor wasn't an investor or a partner. It was a little girl with a simple message: "My dad dropped this." Fate had already begun its work, quietly, gently, and completely unseen. Inside the grand boardroom of Hale Dynamics, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The long mahogany table gleamed under the white lights, and the walls were lined with sleek screens displaying graphs, figures, and company forecasts. Around the table sat the company's top executives, men and women in tailored suits, each focused on one thing: the upcoming merger presentation that would determine the future of the corporation. At the head of the table sat Rebecca Hale, the CEO, poised and composed. She wore confidence like armor. Every move was calculated, every word rehearsed. Today was the day she planned to prove to the world that she was more than capable of leading one of the biggest firms in the country. The meeting began sharply at 9. Rebecca's voice filled the room, steady, powerful, commanding respect. She spoke of growth, strategy, and innovation, while assistants clicked through slides showing charts and projections. The executives nodded, some pretending to understand, others watching her every move, waiting for a flaw. Outside, the city buzzed, but inside this room, time seemed to slow. Power and ambition were the only things that mattered. Then, without warning, the heavy glass doors of the boardroom creaked open. The sudden sound cut through the silence like a pin dropping in a cathedral. Everyone turned. Standing in the doorway was a little girl, no taller than the table itself, clutching a small, worn-out notebook to her chest. Her hair was neatly tied in 2 braids, and her big brown eyes were filled with both fear and determination. For a moment, no one spoke. Excuse me," she said softly, her voice trembling but clear. "My dad dropped this." Murmurs rippled around the table. A few executives exchanged confused glances, others frowned, clearly irritated by the interruption. Rebecca blinked, momentarily thrown off her rhythm. She looked at the child, her expression unreadable. "And who is your father?" she asked, her tone sharp but not unkind. The girl swallowed nervously. He cleans here. My daddy's name is David." The words hung in the air like a challenge. The janitor's daughter, here in the middle of a multimillion-dollar meeting. One of the executives cleared his throat awkwardly, while another whispered, "Security." But before anyone could react, Rebecca held up her hand. Something in the girl's innocent face stopped her cold. Rebecca slowly stood, her heels clicking against the polished floor, and walked toward the little girl. "You said he dropped this?" she asked, gently taking the notebook from Leela's small hands. The leather was old and faded, the edges frayed from years of use. She expected to find cleaning notes or grocery lists, nothing of importance. But when she opened it, her expression changed. Inside the pages were detailed sketches and handwritten notes, technical drawings of ventilation systems, lighting layouts, and cost-saving designs for the building's structure. Precise, thoughtful, innovative. Each page was filled with ideas that were far beyond what anyone would expect from a janitor. Rebecca's eyes moved from one page to the next, her breath catching as she realized the depth of what she was holding. Behind her, the room had gone completely silent. No one dared to move. The executives who had been so eager to dismiss the little girl now stared at the notebook with curiosity and disbelief. Leela shifted nervously on her feet, clutching her stuffed bunny tighter. "He said it helps him remember his ideas," she whispered softly. "He wants to make your building better one day." Those innocent words pierced through the cold atmosphere of the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. Rebecca looked up at the little girl, her eyes softening. For the first time in years, she felt something stir deep inside her, something she had buried beneath ambition and pride, humility. At that moment, the world inside the boardroom changed. It wasn't just a business meeting anymore, it was a mirror, forcing everyone to see what they had ignored for too long. The janitor's little girl had walked into a fortress of power, carrying not a demand, but a reminder that greatness doesn't always wear a suit and wisdom doesn't always come from the top. Rebecca closed the notebook carefully, her hands trembling ever so slightly. "What's your name, sweetheart?" she asked gently. "Leela," the girl replied. Rebecca smiled faintly. "Leela, thank you for bringing this. You've done something very important today." And though no one in that room fully understood it yet, those words marked the beginning of a transformation, not just for the CEO, not just for the company, but for every single person who had ever looked down on someone because of their job title. The janitor's daughter had unknowingly opened a door that could never be closed again. For several long seconds, the boardroom remained frozen in stunned silence. The only sound was the faint rustling of paper as Rebecca Hale slowly turned the pages of the worn leather notebook. Her usual composure was gone, replaced by quiet disbelief. Each page revealed something extraordinary: complex engineering sketches, mathematical notes, and detailed improvement plans that could save the company thousands of dollars annually. The handwriting was neat, precise, filled with annotations that showed deep understanding of architecture, airflow systems, and maintenance efficiency. These weren't random doodles. They were the blueprints of someone who saw problems others ignored and had solutions ready for every one of them. Rebecca's eyes widened as she reached a page labeled Employee Efficiency and Sustainability Proposal. The notes outlined ways to reduce waste, improve staff safety, and even install a low-cost energy recovery system. Every idea was written with both intelligence and compassion, concern for the people working in the building, not just for profits. Her throat tightened as she turned to the next page and read a handwritten quote scrawled across the top. "Greatness isn't about who commands, it's about how you serve." For the first time in a long while, Rebecca felt something stir in her, a pang of humility, a realization that brilliance could exist far beyond corporate titles. She glanced toward the little girl, Leela, still standing near the door, clutching her stuffed bunny nervously. "Your father wrote all this?" Rebecca asked, her voice softer now. Leela nodded proudly. "Yes, ma'am, he works really hard. He always says he wants to make your building better so people don't have to work so hard. He says, ideas can come from anyone, even janitors." Those simple words landed harder than any investor's critique ever could. Around the table, several executives looked down, embarrassed. Just minutes earlier, they'd scoffed at the child's interruption. Now they were witnessing something profound, the realization that the man they'd all overlooked might be one of the smartest people in the building. Rebecca slowly closed the notebook and placed it on the table. Her reflection flickered in its worn leather cover, and for the first time in years, she questioned herself, not her leadership, but her humanity. How many Davids had she walked past without seeing? How many great minds had been silenced because they didn't fit the corporate image? She had built a company that valued ambition, but had she forgotten the value of heart? When she looked up, she saw her reflection not just in the notebook, but in the eyes of the little girl, innocent, honest, and full of pride for her father. "You know, Leela," she said quietly, kneeling so they were at eye level, "your dad sounds like a very smart man." Leela smiled shyly. "He says he just likes to fix things." Rebecca chuckled softly, though her heart ached. "Sometimes the people who fix things are the ones who really make the world work," she whispered. As Leela was escorted back downstairs by a kind security guard, Rebecca sat back in her chair, still holding the notebook. Around her, the executives waited for her to resume the meeting, but she didn't. She simply stared at the pages before her, the words echoing in her mind. "Greatness is about how you serve." For the rest of the meeting, Rebecca's voice carried a different tone, less rigid, more human. She wrapped up the session quickly, her thoughts elsewhere. When it ended, she didn't return to her office right away. Instead, she held the notebook close and whispered to herself, "David Carter, I think it's time I actually met you." What the CEO saw that morning wasn't just a notebook full of ideas. It was a mirror reflecting the truth she'd forgotten, that innovation can come from the most unexpected places, and that the measure of a person's worth has nothing to do with the clothes they wear or the title they hold. It was the moment when pride cracked and empathy slipped quietly in. After the meeting ended, Rebecca Hale couldn't shake the image of that small, trembling girl standing in her boardroom, or the weight of the notebook now resting on her desk. All afternoon, she found herself flipping through its pages again and again. The handwriting, the drawings, the thoughtful calculations, they weren't the work of a simple cleaner. They were the work of a mind that observed, analyzed, and cared deeply about the people and systems around him. She couldn't help but wonder, who exactly was this man? When the last of the executives left for the day, Rebecca made a decision she hadn't made in years, one that didn't involve profits, power, or publicity. She asked her assistant to call for David Carter, the janitor. The assistant hesitated, clearly confused, but Rebecca's tone left no room for question. Within minutes, David was standing in her sleek office, hat in hand, looking both nervous and curious. "Ma'am," he said politely, his voice calm but respectful, "I hope there wasn't a problem. If my daughter—" Rebecca interrupted gently, "Your daughter is fine, Mr. Carter. She's a remarkable little girl." She smiled faintly, noticing how his shoulders relaxed just slightly. Then she held up the notebook. "This belongs to you, I believe." David's eyes widened as he stepped forward. "Oh yes, ma'am. I didn't even realize I'd dropped it. I'm so sorry if it caused any trouble." Rebecca shook her head. "On the contrary," she said softly, "it opened my eyes." She placed the notebook on the desk and gestured for him to sit, but he hesitated, unsure if a janitor was supposed to take a seat in a CEO's office. She noticed, then smiled reassuringly. "Please, Mr. Carter, sit." He sat down slowly, still unsure of why he was there. Rebecca leaned forward, tapping the notebook. "These drawings, these plans, did you create them?" David nodded, embarrassed. "Yes, ma'am. It's just something I do on my breaks. I like to figure out how things can work better, safer, cheaper, cleaner. I didn't mean for anyone to see it." Rebecca studied him closely. "Do you have any background in engineering?" He hesitated, then answered quietly, "I used to be a mechanic, had a small business. When the economy tanked, I lost everything. After my wife passed away, I took this job so I could take care of my daughter. It's not glamorous, but it's honest." Something in his tone struck her deeply. There was no bitterness, no self-pity, just quiet pride and humility. She asked, "And all these designs, you did them just for the sake of it?" David smiled faintly. "I like solving problems. If I see something broken, I can't just walk past it. Sometimes that means a machine, sometimes a person." For a long moment, Rebecca said nothing. The room was silent except for the hum of the city outside. She realized she was looking at a man who embodied everything her corporate empire claimed to value: innovation, integrity, and dedication. Yet he'd never been noticed simply because of his uniform. Finally, she spoke. "Mr. Carter, what you've done here is extraordinary. These ideas could improve our entire operation. You see things no one else does." David chuckled softly. "When you're the one cleaning the floors, ma'am, you notice every crack." The honesty in his words made her smile, and then, unexpectedly, made her eyes sting. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not just a janitor, but a man who had faced hardship with grace, who loved his daughter fiercely, and who never stopped believing in better days. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've taught me more today than most of my executives have in years." David blinked, surprised. "Ma'am, I was just doing my job." "No," she said softly, "you were doing something far greater. You were caring." That evening, as David left her office, Rebecca watched him go, the old notebook once again in his hands. She sat in silence long after he was gone, staring out at the city lights. For the first time in a long while, she felt something shift inside her. She had built a company on ambition and results, but now she understood something deeper. True leadership isn't about commanding, it's about noticing, listening, and lifting others up. And the person who reminded her of that truth wasn't a millionaire or a board member. It was a janitor and his little girl. The next morning, the usually cold and calculated CEO, Rebecca Hale, arrived at the office earlier than anyone could remember. Her mind had been restless all night, replaying her conversation with David Carter, the janitor whose quiet brilliance had shaken the foundation of her perception. She had spent hours reading through his notebook, this time more carefully, realizing each page contained not only innovative ideas, but deep compassion for the workers whose struggles he'd quietly observed. There were detailed sketches of safer cleaning systems, energy-efficient layouts, and handwritten notes about the lives of people most executives never noticed. Sam, the night guard, skips meals to send money to his mother. The elevator's delay wastes time, could fix with minor circuit adjustment, replace harsh chemicals workers cough during shifts. These weren't just ideas. They were the reflections of a man who cared more about people than profit. Rebecca walked into the boardroom that morning, carrying that same worn notebook, but this time her steps were filled with purpose. Her executives were already seated, waiting for their daily briefing. Most of them barely looked up when she entered, too busy scrolling through reports or sipping their expensive coffee. But when they saw the CEO standing silently at the head of the table, eyes sharp, they quieted down. "Before we start," she said, placing the notebook in the center of the table, "I'd like to share something important." The executives exchanged confused looks. Rebecca opened the notebook to a page filled with hand-drawn schematics. "Who here can tell me what this is?" she asked. One executive leaned forward. "Looks like some kind of redesigned proposal, HVAC system." "Correct," she said, "but it's not from our engineering team." She paused, letting that sink in. "This was drawn by one of our janitors." A ripple of murmurs filled the room, disbelief, some even amusement. One executive chuckled under his breath. "A janitor? With all due respect, ma'am, that can't be serious." Rebecca raised her hand. "It's very serious. This man, David Carter, has been working here for 5 years. He's been quietly fixing things no one else noticed. The system you're all so proud of runs smoother because of him." The room fell silent. Rebecca continued, her tone soft but commanding. "He never asked for recognition, never demanded a raise or a title. He just did his work with excellence and humility. But what he's created here," she tapped the notebook, "is nothing short of genius." Then she did something no one expected. She turned to her assistant. "Call David Carter and his daughter. I'd like them both here within the hour." An hour later, David walked into that same intimidating boardroom, his daughter's small hand tucked in his. The executives stared, unsure how to react, but Rebecca greeted them with a genuine smile. "Mr. Carter," she said warmly, "I'd like to thank you in front of everyone." David looked confused. "Ma'am, I don't understand." Rebecca held up his notebook. "This, your work, your heart, it's exactly what this company needs. You've reminded me what true leadership and innovation look like." She turned to the board. "Effective immediately, I'm creating a new position, facility improvement and safety consultant, and I want David Carter to fill it." Gasps filled the room. The janitor looked stunned, glancing at his daughter, who squeezed his hand and beamed with pride. "Ma'am," he stammered. I don't know what to say." "Just say yes," Rebecca said kindly, "and keep doing what you've always done, make this place better." Tears welled up in his eyes as he nodded. "Yes, ma'am, thank you." But it wasn't just David who was transformed that day. The executives, who had long taken their privileges for granted, began to see something shift in their CEO. She wasn't talking about market expansion or shareholder profits anymore. She was talking about human value. As the meeting ended, Rebecca knelt down to the little girl's level. "You're very brave," she said gently. "If it weren't for you, I might never have found your father's notebook." The girl smiled shyly. "Daddy always says good things don't need to be seen to be real." Rebecca's eyes softened. "He's absolutely right." That day the company changed, not just in policy, but in spirit. Workers who had once felt invisible were acknowledged. Managers began to greet the custodial staff by name. The walls of hierarchy began to crack, replaced by something stronger, respect. And at the heart of it all stood a humble janitor and his daughter, proof that sometimes it takes the smallest hands to open the biggest doors. In the weeks that followed that unforgettable day, Carter Industries began to feel like a completely different place. The tension that once hung in the air like a silent cloud of hierarchy started to lift. The rigid barriers between the executives and the workers softened. People began to look each other in the eye, to greet one another with warmth, to listen instead of dismiss. What had begun as a single, humbling moment, a little girl walking into a boardroom, was now transforming an entire company from the inside out. David Carter's promotion wasn't just a new job title, it was a symbol. To the janitorial staff, it was proof that their work mattered. To the executives, it was a mirror reflecting the values they had long forgotten. And to Rebecca Hale, the CEO, it was a second chance to lead not just with power, but with purpose. Rebecca started a floor initiative, where every employee, from cleaners to accountants, could submit improvement ideas anonymously. In the first month alone, over 200 suggestions poured in. Some were simple, like better lighting in the storage areas or new uniforms for the janitorial team. Others were groundbreaking, like ways to reduce waste, improve efficiency, and save energy. When Rebecca reviewed the submissions, she couldn't believe the creativity that had been hidden beneath years of silence. All this time, she said in a staff meeting, we were sitting on a goldmine of talent. We just never bothered to dig for it. David, now the facility improvement and safety consultant, took his role with quiet pride. He didn't strut through the halls or act above anyone. Instead, he listened. He walked the same routes he always had, talking to the night staff, the delivery drivers, and even the interns. When someone complained about a broken vending machine, he didn't pass the issue on, he fixed it himself. His presence reminded everyone that leadership wasn't about giving orders, it was about serving. One afternoon, as David was checking on the maintenance floor, a group of employees stopped him. "Mr. Carter," one said, "we just wanted to say thank you. Things feel different now. People actually care." David smiled humbly. "Don't thank me. Thank the people who decided to listen." Meanwhile, Rebecca's perspective as a leader continued to evolve. She found herself thinking often about David's daughter, Lily, the little girl with the soft voice and unshakable honesty. That small act of courage, stepping into the boardroom to return her father's notebook, had opened her eyes more than any business seminar or leadership book ever could. Rebecca decided to meet with David again, this time not in her office, but in the employee cafeteria. As they sat together over coffee, she said, "You know, when Lily walked into that room, I thought she was interrupting something important. Now I realize she was the most important thing to happen to this company." David chuckled softly. "She's got her mother's heart," he said, "always believed kindness could open any door." Rebecca smiled thoughtfully. "She opened mine." That moment marked a new chapter in Rebecca's life, too. She began organizing mentorship programs for underprivileged youth, inspired by Lily's innocence and courage. "If we want to build a better world," she told her board, "we have to start by believing in people before they believe in themselves." Within months, Carter Industries had become a case study in corporate transformation. News outlets featured stories about its newfound culture of empathy. Productivity soared, but more importantly, happiness did too. The building that once echoed with the sounds of hurried footsteps and silent pressure now hummed with laughter, conversation, and pride. Employees began staying after work, not because they were forced to, but because they believed in what they were building together. The janitorial team, once invisible, was celebrated at company events. David often stood at the back, smiling quietly as others took the stage. He didn't crave the spotlight. He had already found his peace in knowing he had made a difference. And Lily, bright-eyed and full of wonder, became the company's unofficial symbol of hope. Every year, Rebecca made sure to invite her and her father to the annual company dinner. During one of those dinners, Rebecca surprised them both by unveiling something special, a new plaque in the company's main lobby. It read, "To the unseen hands and unheard voices who keep our world moving. May we never fail to see your worth." inspired by David and Lily Carter. As applause filled the room, Rebecca turned to David and whispered, "This isn't just for you, it's for everyone like you." David, with tears in his eyes, replied, "Then we did something right." And indeed, they had. The story of a janitor and his little girl had grown into something much bigger, a movement of compassion and awareness. Carter Industries was no longer just a company, it was a testament to the power of humility, kindness, and courage. In the months that followed, other CEOs reached out to Rebecca for guidance. "How did you do it?" they asked. Her answer was always the same. "I didn't, I just started listening." And in that simple truth lay the most powerful lesson of all, that real change begins not from the top, but from the heart.